Until now, no American presidential race had been more defined by what's happening in courtrooms than what's happening on the campaign trail. Until now. The scale of the abnormality is so staggering that it can actually become numbing. It's all too easy to fall into reflexive habits, to treat this as a normal campaign, where both sides embrace the rule of law, where both sides are dedicated to a debate based on facts and the peaceful transfer of power.
And we play that every day from now to Election Day. A sobering reminder from someone who knows, someone who worked and has covered now a number of presidential campaigns. George Stephanopoulos. The abnormality that he warns of is on full display today, as it has been every day, at the courthouse in Manhattan, where Donald Trump is facing his first criminal trial. As we've discussed, he was again joined by his red tie brigade, individuals there to curry favor with the presumptive Republican presidential nominee. Today's motley crew of Trump allies included MAGA members of Congress like Andrew Clyde, who called January 6 a, quote, normal tourist visit, Kash Patel, who worked at the Defense Department under Trump, former New York City Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik, who has served time in prison, and former president of the New York chapter of the motorcycle gang, the Hells Angels, Chuck Zito. It's just one of the many, many, many ways the ex-president has debased our politics. It's something Stephanopoulos writes about a bit in his new book. He says this, quote, "This book examines crisis management in the modern presidency. During the Trump administration, the president was the crisis to be managed." Joining our conversation, the co-anchor of Good Morning America, the host of ABC's This Week, George Stephanopoulos is here.
Great to see you again.
I have to say, your career inspired my penny in a wishing well that I could do anything like this. So I think about you every single day.
I think often about the first time we met at a Vietnamese restaurant when you were working for George W. Bush.
Seeking your advice.
Yes, a long time ago.
I still watch you. I watch you every day, and I watch you on Sundays. And I wonder how you do it, how you keep this idea that you put out there that none of this is normal.
Well, I think we have to keep on reminding people of that. We can't allow ourselves to become numb to how stunning what we learn every day is. It's just so easy. I mean, you and I both grew up in politics. When I think about the kinds of things that used to knock people out of a race, like Edmund Muskie running for president, he might have had a tear coming out of his race. He's gone. And now you have the first president ever, and I think you could just stop and end it right there, the first president ever who's been indicted and impeached for trying to overturn an election. That should be the beginning and the end of the conversation before you get to everything else we talk about every day, but it's not. And what you see, you talk about the red tie brigade right there. I think that's one of the most stunning things that has happened over the last couple of years. You've had people who on January 6th talked about being in fear for their lives, people on January 6th say Donald Trump should have been tried in a court of law, who are now endorsing him for president of the United States. And I think that whole team of enablers is what's given a bunch of Republican voters kind of the permission structure to just fall in line and say this is all okay.
How do you deal personally and on the air with the gaslighting? I mean, we know now because of fantastic books and investigative journalism that Mitch McConnell sees Trump the way you and I do. But he has fallen in line.
I have a rule for myself. I mean, and everybody's got to, follow their own conscience and do their jobs in the way they think they should be done. For me, if someone who has endorsed Donald Trump comes on my show, I believe they have to account first and foremost for what happened on January 6th and for all of the other things he's being charged. And until you can answer those questions, I'm not going to move on to tax policy or environmental policy or anything. They exist on different planes.
One of them is being liable for sexual assault. But they come for you. I mean, they've targeted you for wanting that question answered. How do you deal with the bullying that happens off the air? You know what, I learned to absorb it. I feel worse for my wife and daughters, and I tell them not to read what's on line. But I know what I said is accurate. I know what I said is truthful. I have no problem doing that. And if it's going to draw some fire, that comes with the job. Do you think we should talk about it more? I was swatted. I've never said that on TV. But some of these tactics are meant to chill our coverage.
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, and I've had lots of different things happen. I was, on the side of that van several years ago where the guy was mailing letter bombs. FBI was at my apartment. There was actually a case where someone is now in jail because of threatening phone calls they were making. They were calling George Stephanopoulos. They were calling my cousin, not me. They didn't know that. But that person is now in jail. You have to be aware. And when it gets closer to election time, I'm a little bit more aware when I'm walking down the street, and I'm a little more likely to get yelled at by somebody. A lot of nice things as well, I should.
I know, it's not all bad, right?
It's not all bad, but you just have to be aware of it and accept, as sad as it is, that it is part of doing the job.
Do you think we should? I mean, there's a story in the New York Times today about political violence and about how Jamie Raskin had similar story. Someone is in jail. There's a restraining order. I mean, should we make that? I think it's our nature. We don't want to be the story. Should we just be out there more?
I don't want to be the story, and I think I'm of two minds with that. What I think about more is, again, going back to, the kind of signals being sent by those at the very top. You see it now in Congress every day. The kind of boorish behavior that has just become run-of-the-mill is astonishing to me.
Nothing that our kids could do in a school, private or public, and not be suspended
or any corporate CEO
Correct.
or anybody in
Correct.
any mid-level job. They'd never be able to hold on the job if they acted like that.
The book is about something that we tried to cover intensely for 4 years, and it's Trump as the national security threat that the national security apparatus had to protect against. And there were little glimpses of it, right? I mean, Mattis quits for cause, the only person that sort of leaves over a national security issue. Kelly's issues with preventing.
Think about your language right there.
Right.
Little glimpses of it.
Right.
His Secretary of State called him a moron. Mattis says he doesn't even respect the Constitution. John Kelly says he's the worst person he ever met. Think about that applying to any other president of the United States at any other time. Their chief of staff, their defense secretary, their secretary of state, their national security advisor are the ones who had the most damning judgments of his competence and character. That is chilling.
And he's the nominee for the upcoming election. I mean, we could keep going. I mean, John Bolton refers him to DOJ because he thinks the U.S. foreign policy around places that we didn't even have scandals. Turkey had been corrupted. I mean, I want to get into the book, and I want to ask you about Trump as a national security threat.
Well, Tom Bossert was one of the people I interviewed for the book.
Yeah.
He was Donald Trump's Homeland Security advisor. He also had a similar job, slightly lower level, for President George W. Bush, and he tried to institute normal structures in the government. They just didn't take. He talks about being on a phone line from South Korea and telling the President of the United States, please don't talk to me about classified information over this phone line. Trump goes on. He talks about walking out of the Situation Room, a meeting with Donald Trump, who's always complaining about leaks, by the way, walks out of a meeting, sees the President of the United States pick up a phone and call a reporter, leaker in chief. And his insight on that was interesting. He said, Donald Trump accuses others of leaking because he believes everyone acts the way that he does.